This moment was a moment of such a fatal parting of the ways that the invisible watchers who were standing at the brink of the deep Glastonbury aquarium, watching the motions of its obsessed animalculae, had never crowded more eagerly around their microscope to learn what the issue would be. And all depended upon which of the two vibrations proceeding from the first cause Cordelia would welcome and which she would reject. The destructive vibration at this important crisis willed her to be cold, chaste, inert, irresponsible, absorbed in her own personal condition, which had never been more interesting to her. The creative vibration, on the contrary, willed her to be warm, alluring, unchaste, and self-forgetful, thinking only of her love for the unhappy man before her. In her earlier relations with Mr. Evans, Cordy had frequently been stupid and remiss, but the sweet usage to which her ungainly form had been subjected, and the caresses by which her cold nerves had been quickened, had changed all this. It was not that she had come to understand the nature of his perversion, but she had come to understand, to a nicety, the place in his consciousness where that closed chamber was, and to be an adept in the art of keeping it closed. She had discovered that by certain devices into which it was not necessary just now to follow her, it was possible to give Mr. Evans so much erotic excitement, of an abnormal but perfectly harmless kind, that his soul could go up and down past that locked-up chamber without a thought of the temptations it contained. It was lucky for Mr. Evans that at the crisis Cordelia was fully aware that to be inert and irresponsible would have been a devilish sin. The vibrations of eternal creative energy which poured down into her nerves from the remote double-natured force at the root of all life was now deliberately welcomed by the spirited girl, and the opposite vibration heroically rejected. She removed up hurriedly to Mr. Evans, got behind him, drew him forward by the sleeve till she got him to the earth, and then, linking her arm in his, turned emphatically and imperatively to Mrs. Girard. "Mother!" "Yes, Cordy?" "I want you to call at Dr. Fell's. I want to take you so very far out of your way if you go by that allotment gardens in that alley I showed you the other day. And just tell him, or Miss Barbara if he's out, what Owen has said about Miss Crow having fainted. By those seats, wasn't it, Owen? On Whirl Hill, and those Germans looking after her. I expect she's all right by this time, or someone else has gone for the doctor. But in any case, do so quick, Mother, please, because I can see Owen's very worried about it." There were no doubt some quick private glances between mother and daughter after this, in which the mother said, "What's up, my dear? Has he been drinking?" And the daughter said, "Don't ask me now, just go. I'll tell you everything about another time." But the upshot was that Mrs. Girard hurried off. The good lady's lilac-colored bonnet rose up like a flag of onset from her gray head as she walked down Wells Old Road, and her old-fashioned velvet-sided boots delivered short, quick taps on the brick pavement under the railings of those red-tiled houses, and every now and then she automatically unclicked and clicked up the metal fastening of her purse, as if she were rejecting all assistance from Mr. Robert Stilley in the management of her affairs. "I cannot think why John keeps going to the bank," she kept saying to herself as she crossed the allotments. Mr. Evans was now alone with Cordelia, and the first thing the girl did was something that at once provoked a faint flicker of natural erotic excitement in the man's perverted nerves. She began pulling down the parlor's brown blinds upon that sunset period of the day. Womanlike, she had absolutely no notion of the explosives she was handling, of the volcano fires under the crater's surface she was stirring up. But womanlike, too, she who had been virgin so long was a cunninger adept than a thousand was a cunninger. I don't think that's a word. Adept than 1,000 thalses in the primeval art of provocation. Daughter of Bloody Johnny as she was, her own erotic nature, now that it had been once excited, was inexhaustible in its amorous devices. And since her moods and her allures were forever changing, Mr. Evans was in the position of the fortunate possessor of a whole harem of ardent playfellows. In none of her Cyprian disguises could poor Cordy be called pretty, but wanton and freshly blooming, she certainly could be called. Such is the magical power of Eros. She had a surprise for her man now. Pulling down the blinds of their tiny parlor on the general principle announced so often by Mother Legge that she could not abide onlookers, and throwing her hat and cloak on the big armchair, she went up to the fireplace where a newly lit flame was making the wood crackle, and leaning against the edge of the mantelpiece, she began a rapid flow of excited words. She was going, she told him, without any doubt, to have a child. She had already gone 2 months with it. She had been yesterday to see Dr. Fell about it. It would be born sometime in September. Mr. Evans dropped his bowler hat on the floor and sank down exhausted in his black overcoat on the big purple chair. Half of her jacket and the rim of her hat were squeezed under him as he sank down, for she had just come in when her mother arrived. But he did not make the least move to extradite them. Nor, indeed, did she. Watching him with swimming eyes, she waited in silence for what she hoped and prayed would prove to be a rush of natural emotion at what she had told him. And drawn towards them by the intensity of their feeling, drawn towards their embryo grandchild of Garrett of Glastonbury, there came floating into this room through the pulled-down blinds a flock of obscure half-material presences, sort of etherealized thought projections that are liable to hover over certain crises in human lives. Like invisible birds, these presences gathered, sweeping into the room out their aqueous mists of their unusual day, gibbering and chittering to one another and circling about Cordelia. Neither the man nor the woman, he in the purple chair whose tasseled valises swept the floor, and she leaning against the flimsy mantelpiece, could have been conscious at that moment that this embryo in the room with them was beginning to assert itself as an entity with its own contact with life mysteries. What they both felt just then at that thought elementals fluttered around the new life in Cordelia's womb, as blowflies are attracted to carrion, or as hummingbird moths to the hearts of carnations, was something very different from these ethereal visitations. What they were aware of was this dumb, numb, cold, heavy downward drag of the vast undersea forces that are subhuman. Chemical forces that belong to the formless world of the half-created and the half-organic, whereof bodies of lower dimensions than ours are composed, and which had a mysterious weight that draws down, a pull, a tug, a centripetal gravitation, against which the soul within us struggles, and upon the surface of which it swims, and over which, when the process of decomposition commences, it spreads its contemptuous wings. This dawn-dragging sensation in their nerves neutralized and counterbalanced these half-embodied air presences, the elemental projections of old magical minds upon that sensitized Glastonbury air, floating like a cloud of disturbed river gnats through those lowered brownish-colored afternoon blinds, out again into the subsequent mists, out again into the wide water meadows. No philosopher has yet appeared who has realized as it should be realized the creative power of the human mind. Behind these brownish-colored, pulled-down blinds on the way to St. Edmund's Pottery, where all those little town council houses carry their red-tiled roofs so trim, there emerged from Cordelia's mind as she stood with her staring, swimming, dazed eyes fixed on her mate and her awkward elbows propped up on that ridiculous mantelpiece, such an intensity of feeling that it had the power to draw out of the air, although she knew it not, these wandering half-lives. Any clairvoyant sense could have seen them there, hovering about her body, and making their weak, chittering signals to the subhuman progeny of her womb, whose embryo consciousness must have been on level with their own half-created fumblings. But why did this thick, dumb, numb, down-dragging pull of cosmic entropy, this dark gravitational weight, sinking into decomposition and dissolution, tug at those two just then? At the man in the purple chair, with the tasseled valances trailing upon the floor, and at the woman who had just told him he was a begetter. Was it because, with that iron bar hammering to get out from its locked-up prison, Mr. Evans's fungus-grown mind groped amid afterbirths and abortions and corpses dead in their travail? Whether the causes may have been of what happened to those two behind those drawn blinds, whatever the cause might have been, both visitations came and went in no more than 100 tickings of the watch in the man's pocket. Phenomena that pass so quickly, thought elementals floating in and floating out, and this death-cold touch of the drought of decomposition. Surely they are beneath notice, beneath analysis, beneath explanation. On the contrary, the very essences of life is revealed in such fleeting impressions, and is experienced such as these eternity itself can be heard moaning and weeping as its Cimmerian waters advance and recede against the lamplight promontories of time. Wow, that's some heady shit there. Well, until next time, I'll see you in Glastonbury. Cheers.